Good morning, All Branch family, and welcome to our online service. My name is Jeremiah. I'm the youth and young adults pastor here at the Olive Branch, and we're so glad that you're able to join us. Hope you had an amazing summer vacation and that you're finally back into your routine, back to school, back to work, and which means Pastor Ken is back, who's going to be starting a new series titled Fans and Followers. It's going to be an amazing series. He's really going to be talking about defining the relationship that we have with God. You don't want to miss out. It's going to be so good. But before we go into that, our worship team, who is always ready to lead us in worship, is going to be leading us. So enjoy the worship, enjoy today's word, as well as enjoy today. And we hope that you have an amazing, amazing Sunday and a great start to your new year. God bless.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I'll worship Your holy name. Sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing Your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I'll worship Your holy name. You're rich in love and You're slow to anger. Your name is great and Your heart is kind. With all Your goodness I will keep on singing. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I'll worship Your holy name. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I'll worship Your holy name. And on that day when my strength is failing, the end draws near and my time has come. Still my soul will sing Your praise unending. 10,000 years and forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I'll worship your holy name. Bless the Lord, oh, my soul. Oh, my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I'll worship your holy name. I'll worship your holy name. I'll worship your holy name.
It's great to be back. I appreciate worship team leading us today. We're starting a new series of talks called Fans and Followers, and you'll kind of pick this up as we get a little further into it. And if you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, or if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, or if you're all new to all of this, then this is going to be really important because it's going to help you to understand what Jesus was all about. And before you buy into anything, you want to know what the price tag is, and that's kind of what this is talking about. For some of you, this is going to be maybe frustrating, challenging. You may want to turn off the TV, or you may want to walk out. There's just lots of different things that could potentially happen here. But I think if we can just kind of stay with this for the next few weeks, I think you'll find it really helpful. And I think it'll be clearer what Jesus is asking of us, what He wants us to do in this relationship with Him. Now, the first part is fans, and we all understand fandom. I'm guessing if I was to ask you, are you a fan of something, you'd probably raise your hand. Maybe it's a football team, maybe it's a hockey team, soccer team, something like that. Maybe it's a business hero that you have, somebody who's made a lot of money, somebody who's done really well in life, and so on. And there's a whole range when it comes to fans. You go into any game, and there are the people who are painting their faces and screaming, and tooting horns, doing all kinds of weird things in the stands. And then there are the people who choose to watch the game or watch whatever it is in the comfort of their house and so on. And they're thinking, I hope they win. And the fans in the stands are screaming, you better win, and they'll boo them if they don't, and so on. My grandmother, Kelly, from Pittsburgh, was a big fan of Pittsburgh Steelers, Pittsburgh Pirates, and sorry, but she didn't give a rip about the Penguins. I mean, I think they came in later, and she wasn't into hockey. But her fandom, because she couldn't really go to the games, was pretty much limited to yelling at the TV, yelling at the umps and so on. So she was 85 years old last time I saw her. She lived to be 96. But last time I saw her in full fandom mode, she was like 85 years old. So, but she still had plenty of energy. And she knew the players' names, and she, booed them, she cheered them. When she was disgusted with them, she'd turn the TV off, I guess. I never saw her in that mode. But, her standards were that she kind of, she maybe should have been on the team because she knew more than the players and knew more than the coaches. Now, you may be a fan of something, and I don't know what it is, and so on. But you may know all the facts about the person that you're a fan of. Might be a hockey star, might be movie star or something like that. You know their careers, you know their families. But it's an obsession with you. It's not a personal relationship. Because if they heard your name, they wouldn't know who you are. And they wouldn't know that you're kind of cheering from the sidelines. And the relationship is between a fan and a star and a hero is they give and you take. That's your only obligation to them. Fans consume what the heroes offer, okay? And you would love to have, a sweat-soaked jersey that they wore at a hockey game, or you'd like to be able to go and take a selfie with them and stuff like this to show your friends. But after the game, when it's all over, you go, you do your job, you hang out with your family, you live your life, and so on. And when their career is over, you may feel bad about it, but you're not going to go to the funeral. It's pretty much it, and you'll move on to somebody else. Being a fan, to be honest, costs really almost nothing, except for the price of entrance into the game or into the stadium or whatever. It's quite convenient because you see, if you're a fan, you can actually change who you're rooting for. Like mid-game, you're watching the Super Bowl on TV, and if your team, is losing, you can, switch fandom and cheer for the other side. So there's really not much of a relationship there. Now, here's why I'm talking about fans, okay? Not long ago, I found out that the Beatles in general, and that John Lennon in particular, were big fans of Jesus. That's what he said. I found out, also that Bob Dylan was a big fan of Jesus and actually, professed to become a Christian at one point. But it didn't change anything in their lives. It didn't change John Lennon's life or his career or what he said publicly, and it didn't change Bob Dylan's life. Lots of people respect Jesus. Lots of people look up to him, but they're fans of Jesus. They're fans of what he did. Now, Jesus knew he had a lot of fans, but he basically died to turn fans into followers. He never wanted fans. He wanted people who would follow him. I mean, being a fan of Jesus, that's a no-brainer. You see somebody who can raise a dead person, somebody who can heal a leper whose life is basically over. They're just going to keep getting more and more pain until they die, and he heals them. When you see what he did, the fact that he could, multiply food, he could walk on the water. I mean, being a fan of Jesus is that's a no-brainer. Of course, people were fans of Jesus. And hundreds of people, thousands of people gathered out on the hillsides. I mean, they would come prepared to camp out for days just to see him in action and hear what he taught. And I'm guessing that they probably memorized his stories and told them to each other. And they bragged, yeah, I touched Jesus, and I saw, you should have seen it. I saw him raise somebody from the dead. But they didn't necessarily follow him. And that's the question that I want us all to ask ourselves, down in the very core. Am I a fan of Jesus, or am I a follower of Jesus? So let's talk about fans a little bit, okay? To be a fan is to receive, as I mentioned, okay? It's not a bad thing, but that's usually where it ends, As a fan, you're vindicated when your team wins, or when the business hero that you love is victorious and makes a lot of money, and you get to invest and so on. And there's chemistry when there are other fans around you. That's a big deal, because if you're sitting in the stands alone, all made up and stuff and blowing your horn and nobody else is there, that's not cool at all. It's not very much fun, okay? And there's no doubt about it that fans love their teams. They love the person, their favorite players, their favorite musicians, their favorite soap opera star. But love is a relative word, right? Because to love somebody, to really love somebody, you have to know them. And fans typically don't know their heroes. What we love as fans is we love the performance of the persons that we are watching on TV or whatever they're doing. We love their performance. We love what they give to us. We love how they make us feel. And fans also buy the merch. I mean, we buy the hats and the T-shirts and all this stuff, and there's some that are cool and some that are worth a lot of money, and there's posters and stuff. There's even Christian merch. You know that, right? Started out, as I remember, with a bumper sticker that said, honk if you love Jesus. Now, some people actually had them honk at them. They honked at the person in front of them, and then the person got out of the car and cussed them out. And it gets pretty weird when it comes to Christian merch, like testaments, thing of mints. That's just tacky, that's weird. When you're a fan, curiosity is pretty much what drives your relationship or your behavior. When you love or you praise or you take pictures of and the facts of, it's about the performance of this person, And you get curious after a while, and you like to know a little bit about, who they're married to and what their kids are like, and what they do, for pastime and so on, what their misdemeanors are, and what they're like in their spare time. And that's, of course, where paparazzi make a ton of money. I mean, it's gold if you can get a picture of somebody in their off time, committing a misdemeanor or looking grungy or whatever. So imagine Jesus coming to Rogers Center, okay, here in the center of Toronto. And in the age of iPhones, can you imagine what it would be like, as Jesus is doing miracles, raising people from the dead and healing lepers and so on, and people taking pictures and posting it on Instagram and sending it to their friends and so on. I mean, it'd be really cool. Nobody since him has done the kinds of things he did. And I'm guessing that, at least, there would be thousands and thousands and thousands of fans there wanting to see what happened and hoping that maybe they could have a miracle in their lives, that Jesus would make them whole or that Jesus would make them successful and give them what they want. But Jesus never courted fans. Like, he never asked people to be a fan. He never invited people to say, hey, well, I'm holding this little healing service out on the hillside. Why don't you come? It'll be really cool, if you can be there and see me in action. In fact, many times when his popularity seemed to be growing and the crowd seemed to be gathering, he'd find an exit ramp someplace and go off to be by himself. So he didn't encourage people to be part of his fan club. So he had fans, there's no doubt about that. They memorized his stories and they talked about him and bragged about being close to him. But Jesus never encouraged that, which is interesting. What Jesus did do was challenge people to face the stuff in their lives. He challenged people to get beyond the surface stuff that fans love, the merch and the look and the pics and everything like that. And I think if Jesus were here with us, he'd have this DTR conversation. So enter the DTR conversation. Now, as you probably know, this means we've got to define the relationship. Now, DTR conversations are usually initiated by half of the dating relationship, usually the female half, And this couple, they date and they date and they date, and it's great, and sometimes it's late, and so they have a late, great date, and so on. But the question comes up, what is this all about? Is this going somewhere? And so one of them, again, usually the female, initiates the DTR conversation. I'm telling you, the DTR conversation makes grown men, with hair in their chest and beards and stuff like this, get faint, and begin to sweat and, and have diarrhea and things like this, But it's the reality check that's needed in the relationship. And the basic question is, are you just playing me along? Are you just looking for somebody to be your companion when you watch Netflix and when you go to movies and when you do, go out with friends and go to parties and stuff? Are you just looking for a companion, somebody to make you comfortable? But then you're going to trade me in for somebody else, when I start to age or when I make less money than somebody else. And this is really at its heart what the DTR conversation is really all about. Is this about you? Or is this about us? And that's the DTR conversation, I think, that Jesus would have with us. Now, if Jesus were to sit down with you and look you in the eye and say, okay, let's define the relationship. Is this about you? Or is this about us? See, because, you can call yourself a Christian, and the word Christian actually means little Christ, and it was actually a derogatory term back in Antioch, Syria, of all places. They had these people who followed Jesus, and people would mock them and say, you're like a little Christ in the room, You're like a little Christian, a little tiny Christ walking around, and you're doing the things that Jesus would do. So it was actually a compliment to them, even though it was a derogatory term. Being a fan of Jesus, really liking his stories and, and the way he loved and the impact that he had and the way he's changing the world, this is a lot different than actually following Jesus. Very different. So let me just be really clear on this, okay? If you're listening in or whatever's going on, I'm not asking about whether or not you go to church. I'm not asking about whether or not your parents were Christians and you had the little family altar at home before school, or if you repeated a message after a message, or repeated a prayer after a message one time. I'm not asking if you have a Bible app on your phone, or if your ringtone is a worship song, or if you attended Christian summer camp, or if you wear witness wear and you have it in your closet at home right now, or if you understand what, having a family altar is about, or what traveling mercies are, or, when describing your finances, you say, I've been blessed, or if you raise your hands when you sing worship songs. That's not what we're talking about. foundational passage that is really talks about following Jesus. It's a little bit scary. So let me kind of introduce it. He's very clear about it. He's addressing a crowd in Luke chapter 9. Let me just set it up. Jesus is debriefing his disciples, and they've been off on this ministry thing. They've gone out 2 by 2, and they've healed people and raised the dead and cast out demons, and they're coming back after this first apostolic mission, and they're talking to Jesus about what actually happened out there. So, disciples are likely thinking, so the crowd, they're trying to find Jesus, and a whole bunch of them come in, okay? And the disciples are probably thinking, come on, folks. I mean, you're so needy and greedy. Give us some space with Jesus. After all, we're his apostles, Let us catch our breath. But Jesus is gracious. And he reaches out to them. He teaches them. He heals the ones who are sick, And by the time this is all over, it's late, And so he tells his disciples, why don't you get them something to eat? Feed them supper. Well, that's interesting because they're way out in the middle of nowhere, And this little kid comes forward, and he's got 5 loaves, probably way smaller than this piece of pita bread. And they're kind of like this, barley loaves of flat bread. So he's got 5 of those, and basically what would be a can of sardines. So Jesus has everybody sit down, and he says to his disciples, watch this, you're going to feed them. So he begins to break the bread and multiply the fish. And by the time he's done, he has fed what people estimate now would be somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 people with a single bag lunch from this little kid. From what I can gather, he's made somewhere between 2 and 3 tons of food. Now, in a world where food was very precious and scarce, there was no scarcity there. Everybody stuffed themselves that day, and there were 12 basketfuls of leftovers left to put in the fridge when they were done. Now, according to John's account, this amazing miracle had the people shouting, give me a J, give me an E, Jesus, let's make Jesus king. John writes this, when the people saw him do this miraculous sign, they exclaimed, surely he is the prophet we've been expecting. When Jesus saw that they were ready to force him to be their king, he slipped away into the hills by himself. It turns out that a large group of these people followed him around the lake the next day. And it's then that he has this DTR conversation. And Jesus replied, he says, I tell you the truth, you want to be with me because I fed you. In other words, I give, you take. That's the relationship. Not because you understood the miraculous signs. Don't be so concerned about perishable things like food. Spend your energy seeking the eternal life that the Son of Man can give you. For God the Father has given me the seal of his approval. This is bigger than you getting a free lunch. Now, what Jesus is saying is very straightforward, You like to hang around with me because I fed you. Dogs do that, Bears do that. Raccoons do that. Pigeons do that. The DTR conversation between a guy and a girl would be like saying, our relationship isn't about you. It's about us. And it's really interesting when you think about some of the songs that surround this, is it about you or us? It's like, you're the wind beneath my wings. Notice what it's about. It's about me. You hang out under my armpits and you give me wind, You make me a better person. It's not about us. It's about me and what you can do for me. Now, as you read through this conversation that Jesus has with them, it becomes clear that Jesus is pushing them. Jesus is urging them into something that is authentic, something beyond just taking what he has to offer. But the more he explains about himself and about his mission and the fact that he's been sent from the Father and that just like bread is for food, he's essential to life so that they can live forever, their relationship gets jarred because their relationship with him was, well, you give, we take. You make the meals, we take. You heal, we get healed. You raise the dead, we get raised. And a lot of DTR, conversations, I was about to say arguments, end up in arguments, right? And sometimes name calling. And this one does too, Jesus pushed them, and they argued with him, and they argued with each other, and they finally said, aren't we right in saying that you're demon possessed? And eventually stomped off into the sunset. And then this, many of his disciples said, this is very hard to understand. How can anyone accept it? And at this point, many of his disciples turned away and deserted him. And then Jesus turned to the 12 and he asked, are you going to leave? So, how would you define your relationship with Jesus? Is it a transaction that you made, where he gives his life, and you take it and then that's it? Or is it actually a relationship? See, that's the key. And here's the question that I need to ask you at this juncture. Is your relationship with Jesus such that he can actually even contradict you? That he can offend you, just like these people were offended, and you will stay with him? See, because Jesus is always right. That's the hard thing about it. I mean, you may have a friend who thinks that they're always right. They're even right when they're wrong, and it's hard to be around them. But Jesus is always right. He's right about everything that he said about life. And Jesus, though, is different many times than a friend who's always right, because he loves people. He loves them. He handles them tenderly. He handles them kindly. His goodness always shows through. He loves people we can't stand. I mean, do you realize that Jesus, he loves the Harvey Weinsteins of the world. He loves child molesters. He hates what they do, and he's going to judge them for what they do, but he loves them. He loves R. Kelly. He loves Bill Cosby. He loved Hitler. He loved Pol Pot. He loved Mao Zedong. He loves them all because that's who he is, even though he hates what they do. See, what's fascinating about Jesus is that he loves people that we hate, and yet sometimes he will contradict the things that, the Canadian government and other governments have put their official blessing on. He will contradict your opinions, even though they may be politically correct. Does he have permission to offend you? Because if he does, it's a relationship, and if he doesn't, then you're just a fan. In a world of contempt that we live in, people are just as likely to, use some profanity and say, I'm done with this, and then walk off into the sunset. That's what we're like. Here's what you need to know if you want to follow Jesus and not be just a fan. First of all, he's right, but he won't pound you with it. He won't smack you with it. He won't stomp you into the ground with it. He will work with you in the relationship to help you understand why he thinks and why he says what he does. And this is, you read what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. He's right about anger. He's right about, judging. He's right about worry. He's right about loving your enemies and about us forgiving other people no matter what they've done. He's right about how we handle sex. He's right about divorce. He's right about how that we deal with the poor and the disadvantaged. He's right about how we handle our money. Jesus is right. And you know why? It's because he's God. All things were made through him. Nothing that exists that wasn't made through him. That's why he's right. And Jesus is very straightforward. He's kind. He's gentle in every DTR conversation. But he's clear about the fact that following him is going to create some conflict in your life. It's going to conflict with what you want to do. It's going to conflict with what you think you need to do to save your career, save your job, or save your relationship or whatever. It's going to conflict with your life, but it will ultimately bring life. Right in the sequence of events here, Jesus asked his disciples, about what other people were saying about him. And of course they're saying, well, they think maybe you're John the Baptist come back from the dead, or maybe you're, one of the prophets or whatever. And Jesus then says, so what about you? And Peter pipes up and he says, well, you're the Christ. That's obvious. You're the Messiah. Now, we're used to that title. In fact, we've given it to Jesus as kind of a last name, Jesus Christ, But back in that day, those were explosive words. Those were words that could get you crucified by the Roman government. To be the anointed one was to be the one that all the Jewish people had been waiting for 2,000 years. And so they're thinking, fame, we finally get it. We finally get to experience the fame that we've always dreamed of. And then Jesus does this reality check. It's the DTR talk. And he begins to talk about the fact that he's going to get rejected, and he's going to get pounded, and he's going to get tortured, and he's going to get scourged, and he's going to get nailed to a cross, and he's going to die, and he's going to rise again the third day. That's the reality check. And it's in this context that he makes the distinction between a follower and a fan. Now, listen carefully. We're going to come back to this verse again. But listen to what he says. Then he said to the crowd, and if any of you wants to be my follower, you want to follow him? You must give up your own way and take up your cross daily and follow me. And we think, well, that doesn't sound like fun. That sounds painful. You mean I can't do my own thing and have your blessing on it? You mean, I may have to actually experience some pain in this process? And so, come on, Jesus, be realistic about this. He says this, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you will give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but you yourself are lost or destroyed? Tough words, man. Now, Jesus, it's pretty clear here, is not offering, okay, we have our platinum membership here, and then we have gold membership, and then we have silver membership, and then we have the bronze membership, and then we have the wood membership, and then we have the paper membership. It's like one or the other. Either you're a fan or you're a follower. Now, in the next weeks, we're going to be looking into this, what this means, and other passages where Jesus had, the DTR conversation with people. But what I want you to think about is, okay, I want you to think about your hero, the person that you're a fan of. So can this hero of yours, can they tell you when they're going to die, what's going to happen to them, how they're going to die, and what's going to happen after they die, and that they're going to have breakfast with you 3 days later? If they can do that, then you follow them. But if they can't, the question is, why would you ever follow somebody who can't pull off what Jesus did? Why not follow Jesus? If someone can do something like that, and they also say, I and the Father are one, well, good chance you got to believe them, okay? It's a credible claim. If someone says this and says that God, at the very core of who he is love, and that's what he wants to turn you into, somebody who knows how to love, then that's credible. The bottom line through this whole thing, and I'm guessing that's going on maybe in your conversation right now, is it worthwhile to follow Jesus? What do I get out of it? Is it going to be a good deal? Not from the shadows, not when it feels right, not just when it seems to benefit you and give you what you want, so that you die at the age of 95 with money in the bank and a smile on your face. No, it goes way bigger than that. Jesus defines what kind of relationship he wants with us here, that he's Lord of all. And I'll tell you what that means, that he is Lord of all. That means that he leads and we follow. To follow by somebody by definition, is that they lead and then you imitate what they do. That's what it means to follow. Now, there are some mystery parts to this that we're going to get into more later on. Take up your cross daily. What does that mean? We got to carry a cross up a hill and die on it? What does it mean to lose your life? Does that mean you got to die if you're going to follow Jesus? Well, we're going to talk about that. But what I want to close with today is 2 stories from John's biography about Jesus. Jesus gave 2 men what they had wanted all their life. And it's interesting to see what they did and where they ended up, because they chose very different directions when it came to following. First guy, I've talked about him quite recently, had spent his whole life laying by a pool. And he wasn't getting a tan there, and hanging out with the chicks or anything like that. John, who tells a lot of DTR stories, says that this guy had been lame, and for 38 years, he'd been hauled out to this pool, lay there every day, hoping for a miracle. And Jesus walks through the crowd of sick people, and he's walking through them, and carefully. And he comes to this one guy who'd been there for 38 years, and he says, "Do you want to get well?" Now, that's a strange question, because I've been laying here for 38 years. What do you think? So Jesus heals him on the spot, tells him to pick up his mat and go home, and he leaves. In 30 seconds, he has what he has wanted for and longed for his entire life. He has a body that works. Now, here's the irony of this moment. After this spectacular miracle has happened and so on, The Pharisees come along and they arrest this guy in a technicality because it's the Sabbath and he's carrying his mat, and the Pharisees are kind of like the postal service, when you take a package in and they take out the tape measure, and they measure it to make sure how big it is and stuff like this, and then they weigh it, see how much they're going to charge you. Well, technically, this guy was carrying too much on the Sabbath because they had it all, laid out in terms of what you could carry and what you couldn't carry. And it was considered work, because he was carrying his mat on the Sabbath. So when he gets confronted, guess what he says? He says, hey, wasn't me. The guy who healed me told me to pick up my mat and walk. Wasn't me, though. Wasn't me. It's the strangest thing. He didn't know who healed him. Now, you'd think he would remember somebody who gave him back his life. Or as Jesus was leaving, and he's standing up saying, hey, who was that guy? But he doesn't. Remember the DTR question? Does Jesus have the right to offend you? To tell you something about yourself that you don't like? To tell you to do something that you really don't want to do? So Jesus finds this guy later in the temple, and he says to him, now you're well, so stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. And then the man went and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had healed him. Now, some scholars believe, and I personally believe, that this comment, what goes on here, reveals that this guy had gone to the temple not because he wanted to worship God, but because he wanted to lay there at the temple and feign being lame, because he'd done that his whole life. That's how he earned his living. So he's doing it again. And I'm guessing that Jesus came and confronted him and said, you need to stop what you're doing, or something worse is going to happen. This guy gets vindictive. He turns Jesus in, knowing that the Pharisees are going to go after him. And what's interesting, when you look at this and you chart it chronologically, it's from this point on that the Pharisees and the religious leaders hound Jesus and eventually nail him to a cross. From this moment on, he gets his revenge. See, fans say, heal me, feed me, give me what I want, make my life pleasant. Make my life easy. Bring out sunshine on the day I get married, Just gloss up my life. Make me famous. Make me important. Satisfy my ego. That's what fans say. But that's not what Jesus does. The story about the second man comes a few chapters later, and it starts when Jesus and his disciples see a man who's been blind from birth. So the disciples are saying, oh man, who screwed up? Was it this guy, or was it his parents, or somebody else, Because somebody did something wrong that this guy's blind. And Jesus says, no, you've totally lost the plot here. This is to see what God is going to do in this instance. So Jesus heals him purposefully in a way that he knows is going to offend the religious leaders. First of all, he does it on the Sabbath. And of course, they told him that was sinful to heal. Think about this. You heal a blind guy, but it's sinful to do it on the Sabbath. Second thing is, Jesus spits in the mud and wipes this guy's eyes with this mud that's made with saliva and dirt, okay? So for this spit to be on this guy's eye, he would be ceremonially contaminated for a week. And of course, the troubles come. Pharisees, hound this guy. They find him, they hound him, and they interrogate him multiple times. They even pull in his parents and interrogate him. Is this your son? We don't think he is, because we think he probably has been seeing, all of his life. Who did this? Why did he do it? How did he do it? And they're going on and on, This goes back and forth and back and forth, And it gets to a point where this guy who's been healed is so frustrated and disgusted with them. And he basically says, you want to become his disciples too? And of course, they get really offended at that. They throw him out of the temple, or throw him out of the synagogue, which is one of the worst things that could happen. And they call Jesus a sinner, and they curse this guy's life. Jesus finds him, and they have this final conversation. When Jesus heard what had happened, he found the man and asked, do you believe in the Son of Man? Do you believe in the Son of Man? And the man answered, who is he, sir? I want to believe in him. You've seen him, Jesus said, and he is speaking to you. Yes, Lord, I believe, the man said. And he worshiped Jesus. This wasn't about, he said a little prayer, sang a little song, cried a tear or two. This is like he fell down on his face. He understood who Jesus was and is and worshiped him. That's what followers do. Two very spectacular healings, two men who have their lives back, two very different responses. And here's my point. It's possible for Jesus to make a huge difference in someone's life and for them to just be fans, never follow him. I don't know if you remember the story. Jesus healed 10 lepers, and only one came back. 10% of the fans will follow Jesus is what that says to me. See, there were a lot of people that did that, Jesus had thousands and thousands of people who gathered, who heard him talk, who saw him heal, saw him do amazing things that nobody had ever done. Hearts were moved. People cried. People understood what sin was. People had somebody in their corner who would advocate for them, for the first time, the people who were the scoundrels and the prostitutes, they loved a prophet and they were accepted by him. And yet when Jesus was in Pilate's courtyard, it was strangely silent when it came time to speak up. Now, some of you may resent me for what I'm saying and what I've said. You think I'm meddling, you decide that you're not going to come back or you're not going to listen to any more, messages on YouTube, until I change my style or change the series or something like this. But I'm telling you, this DTR talk that you have with Jesus, where you define the relationship, is the most important talk that you ever have. Be the most important point in your life. And so today, and for these next few weeks, I want to ask you to be honest with yourself. Be honest with God. Be authentic. And ask yourself the question, am I a fan or am I a follower? See, the people who followed Jesus, they didn't get celebrated at all when they did that, but they changed history. You see, right now, you're writing a story with your life, and you're writing it, a chapter with every decision that you make. What's the chapter going to be about your relationship with Jesus? I mean, what do you want it to read? If your kids or your grandkids or your great-grandkids read the story of your life, what do you want them to read about you? Like when it really came down to it, when it really came time, to be authentic, that you chickened out? You decided that you were just going to kind of watch from afar and, do, the religious thing and so on. Fan or follower? What do you want your story to say? And there's some reasons I'm asking this. First of all, it's my responsibility to be direct with you, okay? So I wouldn't be doing what I'm supposed to do if I wasn't direct. But I'll tell you, we live in a world right now that demands authenticity. Our whole world has been to hell and back, and people are not interested, in spin. They aren't interested. They know what it is. They know that you can jazz up your, Instagram account or your Facebook page or whatever it is that you have, and you can make your life look way, 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 way better than it actually is. But people are looking for authenticity because you see, down at the core of their lives, people think that Christians just talk big and they don't actually live what they say they're going to. And there's been a researcher out there, Barna Research, and what he has found is that to some extent is true, that our sexual morality, how we handle our money, how we make our decisions, how we live our lives are pretty much like, everybody else. I'm telling you, at the end of the day, you're going to want to be authentic. You're going to want to be real in what you do. And the second reason why this DTR conversation is so critical is that opposition to Jesus and the people who follow him, is growing in this part of the world. And I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not trying to say, we're going to get hauled off into... I don't think that's going to happen. But I'm just saying that opposition to Jesus is growing, and the people who follow him especially. And you're going to have to decide which way it's going to go in your life. Because the public opinion will likely not be in your favor if you decide to follow Jesus, and you just need to understand the reality of that. What's it going to be? What's it going to be? See, I don't know the future. But I do know that this is all about eternity. This is about how you will want to have lived your life. Because Jesus, the one you're following, is the judge of all creation. He's the Lord of all. One day, every knee will bow, every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord. Question then is not going to be, did you live a good life? Did you make lots of money? Did you have really, really, really successful kids? And everybody, realize how important you really were. The question is going to be, did you make a difference? Did you follow Jesus? What are you? Are you a fan? Are you a follower? And maybe the question is not, do you follow Jesus? Maybe the question is, will you follow Jesus? Will you follow him? Will you follow him? Let's pray. God, I pray that you will help us to be authentic, the very core of who we're supposed to be and who you've called us to be and who we need to be at this juncture of history. Help us to follow you, Jesus. Give us the strength and the courage to do that. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to worship, and then we're going to come back, and I'd like to send you out.
From the sky, leaving heaven's throne. I was meant to die, you wouldn't let me go. The riches of your grace I could not afford. My guilt has been erased, now I'm forever yours. Oh, what a price you paid, trading the highest place. Laid down your crown for me, how great a care. From death life has begun, a garden from the grave, bursting through the night, yours is the victory. From death life has begun, a garden from the grave, bursting through the night, yours is the victory. Oh, what a price you paid, trading the highest place. Lay down your crown for me, how great a king. Oh, what a life you gave. You gave up everything that you would die for me. How great a king. 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 For all you are, for all you've done, we lift you up, lift you up. For all you are and all you've done, we lift you up. For all you are and all you've done, we lift you up. die for me. How great a care.
My blessing on you is not that God gives you everything that you want so that you can be successful and so that you can be healthy and make lots of money. My blessing on you is that Jesus would travel with you and that you would follow him and that you would see him in every corner, every place that you visit, everywhere that you find yourself. And that he would give you the strength to be the best version of yourself there with the power that he gives through his Spirit. Amen.
Good morning, Olive Branch family. Today I'm here with Laura, who's one of our community partners, and she works with Fight for Freedom. Laura, it's been a while since we've chatted, but could you remind our church family what Fight for Freedom is about?
Fight for Freedom is a local Christian organization that fights sex trafficking in our city, country, and around the world.
And the last time we chatted was in February for your Feb fundraiser. So what are some updates since then?
Fight for Freedom is starting a new ministry called Buyers Resist, which is a ministry geared towards the perpetrators of sex trafficking.
So this month, Fight for Freedom is having a walk to raise money. So what are some ways that we can come alongside you and support Fight for Freedom?
Some ways you can support the walk is you can come out and walk with us in Stouffville, September 17th. You can pray during the walk for sex trafficking in our cities. And going forward, I'm hoping to start visiting some massage parlors where it's kind of known sex traffickers work. So praying for that ministry to start would be very much appreciated.
Thank you for joining us today and giving us an update about Fight for Freedom and how we can get involved in the walk and what is coming up with your ministry. If you would like to connect with Laura to maybe help her with this new ministry she is starting, you can reach out to branchout@tob.ca and I can connect you with her. If you're interested in participating in the walk and want to find out more information or again just to pray during the walk, please scan the QR code that's coming up so that you can gain more information.